The wind howled like a wounded animal when I realized we wouldn't survive. Not all of us. The sky, a deep blue, began to transform into a black shroud without stars, while the cold, that cold you don't feel, you experience, began to tighten its icy grip around our bodies. It was the kind of cold that first burns like fire, then numbs the flesh, to finally steal life without warning. It all began 3 days earlier, when we spotted tracks of a herd of caribou migrating south. 10 of us left our village, me, my wife Akna, our 8-year-old daughter Nivi, my brother Malik with his family, and 3 more experienced hunters. We were confident, strong, prepared. Or so we thought. The first day was generous. We brought down 2 caribou, enough to fill our stomachs and carry meat back to our village. We smiled as we cut the meat, our faces marked by sweat that quickly turned into tiny ice crystals on our brows. Nivi ran around, her steps leaving small impressions in the snow that were soon erased by the wind. "Dad, are we far from home?" she asked, her dark eyes reflecting the rapidly changing sky. "Not too far," I lied. "We were at least 2 days' walk from the village. We'll be back soon." That's when the elders of our tribe always said that fate smiles before showing its teeth. By the end of the second day, the weather changed. Not gradually, as it usually does, but with the speed of a polar bear emerging from the snow. The clouds gathered heavy and oppressive, and the temperature plummeted. Our elders call this Anupak, the frozen breath of dead gods. "We need to set up camp. Now." Malik shouted against the rising wind. His face, usually bronze, was pale. He knew the signs. We worked quickly, our hands already numb from the biting cold as we set up our makeshift shelter. Rocks, skins, whatever we had available to create a barrier against the elements. The wind was now so strong it seemed to rip the words from our mouths before we could even fully pronounce them. That's when Aput, our most experienced hunter, made the discovery that would seal our fate. "The flint. The firestone is broken," he shouted, the barely contained panic in his usually calm voice. "And the tinder is soaked." A heavy silence fell over us, more terrible than the howling wind. No fire. On one of the coldest nights any of us had ever faced. Fear spread like poison among us. I saw Akna's eyes searching mine. She knew. In her gaze was the silent understanding that we were facing death. "Dad, I'm cold," Nivi whispered, her small teeth already chattering in a frantic rhythm. I pulled her against my chest, as if I could transfer all the warmth from my body to hers. "We need to stay together," I shouted to the others, "body to body, keep the heat." We huddled together like seal pups, forming a desperate circle of human warmth, the children in the center, the adults on the outside. The skins we carried were placed over and under us. But we already knew it wouldn't be enough. The Arctic cold is not something you fight, it's something you hide from. And without fire, we were exposed. The first hours were filled with tense hope. We told stories to keep our minds alert. I spoke of Sedna, the sea goddess, and how her frozen fingers turned into the first seals. Malik sang ancient hunting songs. Anything to avoid thinking about the cold that penetrated every layer of our clothing, that settled into our bones like an uninvited guest that would never leave. The wind outside roared, as if the world itself was being torn apart. The temperature continued to drop. My breath condensed into a white cloud in front of my face, and soon I realized my eyelashes were freezing, sticking together when I blinked. "Everyone stay awake," I ordered, my voice already hoarse. "If you sleep..." I didn't finish the sentence. We all knew. Sleep in those conditions was a one-way street. Nivi trembled in my arms, her small body shaking with violent spasms. "Dad, tell another story," she asked, her voice as fragile as thin ice. I began to tell about the first Inuit, how our ancestors learned to survive in this white and cruel land, how they taught us to respect the ice, to read the sky, to understand that here at the top of the world, life and death dance together under the light of the northern lights. "It's so dark," Aput murmured from the other side of the circle. So dark. I can't see your faces. It was true. The night had completely swallowed us. No moon, no stars, just absolute darkness and the relentless lament of the wind. Never in my life had I felt such deep isolation. It was as if the rest of the world had vanished, and we existed only as a bubble of cold and despair. It was around the middle of the night that the first of us departed. Tulak, the oldest of the hunters, simply stopped shaking. His body, which had been violently convulsing against mine, grew still. I called his name once, twice. No response. Malik began, unable to finish. Yes, I replied. The first death is always the hardest. The ones that follow become terribly familiar. Akna sobbed silently beside me. Nivi no longer spoke, only emitted small whimpers with each exhale. Her fingers clutching my parka felt like frozen claws. Stay awake, little owl, I whispered in her ear. Think of the sun. Think of summer, when the sun never sets, and the tundra is covered in purple flowers. She nodded weakly, but her eyes were already distant, as if she were contemplating something beyond the darkness surrounding us. Time lost meaning. Minutes, hours, became abstract concepts. There was only now, an endless now of pain and cold. My muscles burned from the effort of constantly trembling. My mind began to wander, as if part of me was already detaching, floating above the desperate circle we formed. That's when I heard Nivi softly humming, a lullaby that Akna used to sing to her. Her voice was so weak, I could barely distinguish the melody. Sleep, little seal, under the blue ice. The spirits guard your sleep, while the auroras dance. Nivi? I called, shaking her gently. Nivi, don't sleep. Keep talking to Dad. But she continued to sing, her voice growing more distant. I tried to move her, to make her eyes meet mine, but her head fell back like a wilted flower. Nivi! The scream that came from my throat was not human. It was the primordial wail of a father losing what is most precious in the world. Akna grabbed my arm with surprising strength. She's just sleeping, she insisted, her voice trembling with denial and fear. Just sleeping. But I knew. Just as I knew Tulak would not return, I knew my little owl had flown away, to a place where the cold could not reach her. The rest of the night was a hazy nightmare. 2 more hunters succumbed to the icy embrace of death. Malik's wife, Tapisa, stopped responding to her husband's desperate calls. Our circle of life grew smaller, while the circle of death expanded around us. I held Nivi's lifeless body against my chest all night. I couldn't let her go. I couldn't accept that this small vessel of joy and curiosity was now empty, abandoned by the spirit that animated it. When the first pale rays of dawn began to light the horizon, revealing the sky in shades of gray and blue, only 4 of us were still breathing. Me, Akna, Malik, and surprisingly, his youngest son, Inuksuk, only 5 years old. The silence was deafening. The wind had ceased, as if satisfied with its harvest of souls. The world was still, frozen in a moment of mourning and disbelief. We have to move, Malik finally said, his voice almost unrecognizable. Or we will die too. Akna held my arm. We have to leave them, she said, looking at Nivi in my arms. I can't, I replied, the tears freezing on my cheeks before they could even fall. I can't leave her here, alone in the ice. She's not alone, Malik said, pointing to the other bodies. And she's not here anymore. Her spirit has already gone to hunt with our ancestors. I knew he was right. With a shattered heart, I laid Nivi's body on the snow, next to the others. Her expression was peaceful, as if she were merely sleeping, waiting to be awakened by the smell of meat cooking over the fire. We used our last strength to cover the bodies with stones, to protect them from scavenging animals. It was the best we could do. A hasty farewell, insufficient, but necessary for the 4 survivors to have any chance. The way back to the village was a journey through frozen hell. Our bodies, weakened by the cold and grief, barely responded to commands. Each step was a battle. Each breath, a small and temporary victory against the death that still lurked. Inuksuk, Malik's son, fell several times. With each fall, I wondered if he would get up again. But the boy had within him a strength that defied his age and size. Perhaps it was the same indomitable spirit that allowed him to survive the night when others, stronger and more experienced, perished. We arrived at the village at dusk the next day, more dead than alive. Our faces were blackened from frostbite, our eyes empty of everything except pain. The others first welcomed us with joy, which quickly turned to horror when they realized how many of us were missing. The elders took us inside, lit fires, wrapped us in warm skins. But there was a cold inside us that no earthly flame could melt. That night, while the shamans performed rituals to guide the spirits of the dead, I remained seated, staring into the fire with eyes that could not see. In my mind, I replayed every moment of that terrible night, searching for the point where I could have done something differently, where I could have saved Nivi. Akna sat beside me, her body as close to mine as possible, as if we still needed to share warmth to survive. "It wasn't your fault," she finally said, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 uncried tears. "I should have realized the weather would change," I replied. "I should have brought more ways to make fire. I should have predicted the unpredictable," she interrupted. "Tamed the untamable? No man can do that, not even you." Her eyes, once bright like stars in the night sky, were now dull, veiled by grief. But there was also a strength in them, a fierce determination that said we would continue, that we would survive, no matter how torn we were inside. "The elders say this was the coldest night in 7 generations," she said. No one could have been fully prepared. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was nothing I could have done differently. But that did not lessen the pain, did not fill the void left by my daughter. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Life continued its relentless cycle. The ice melted and formed again. We hunted, fished, survived. Akna gave birth to another son the following winter, a strong boy with serious eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom of the world. We named him Tulimak, the one who survived. But the deadliest night of the Arctic never fully left us. It lives on in our nightmares, in the empty spaces around the fire where laughter and stories once thrived, in the invisible scars we carry in our souls. Malik was never the same again. He became quiet, introspective. He began to hunt alone, as if seeking some kind of redemption or punishment in solitude. His son, Inuksuk, grew up with the shadow of that night hanging over him. The other children called him the one who danced with the spirits, part fear, part reverence. And me? I became obsessively cautious. I never went hunting again without 3 different methods of making fire. I never trusted the clear sky or optimistic forecasts. The price of my learning was too high to be wasted. Sometimes, on the darkest winter nights, when the wind begins to pick up, I can still hear Nivi's voice humming her lullaby. In those moments, I feel her small body in my arms, not cold and stiff like that last time, but warm and alive, full of the energy she radiated like a little sun. And then I remember the last words she sang before she left. "The spirits guard your sleep, while the auroras dance." Perhaps it is true. Perhaps the spirits are guarding her sleep until we can meet again, in a place where the cold cannot reach us, where night never falls so heavily, so absolutely. But until that day comes, I continue to tell our story, so that others may learn, so that others may respect this frozen world we live in even more, so that others may understand that here, at the top of the world, the line between life and death is as thin as the first ice of autumn. And so that Nivi, my little owl, is not forgotten. So that her spirit knows that even now, years later, her father still looks to the sky when the auroras dance. searching for her among the lights. Because in the Arctic, death is not the end of the story. It is just another way of existing in this land of extremes, where we learn that the true cold is not the one that freezes flesh, but the one that penetrates the soul when we lose those we love, to the deadliest night we ever knew. The deadliest night of the Arctic continues to remind us of the thin line between life and death that the Inuit people face daily. This story of devastating loss shows that, even with generations of traditional knowledge, nature will always have the final word. If this story touched you, help us preserve these narratives, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful accounts of survival and indigenous culture. When we give voice to indigenous peoples, we honor not only their past, but strengthen their future in the fight against forgetfulness.